What if everything you know about death and life is a lie, not a mistake, a design, a psychological illusion crafted so perfectly you never thought to question it? They taught you that life begins at birth and ends at death. They told you time moves forward one tick, one heartbeat at a time. But what if time doesn't flow like a river? What if it spreads like an ocean? Quantum physics says it already does. Your past, present, and future happening all at once. Scientists call it the block universe. Mystics call it the eternal now. Same truth, different language. So why do you still feel stuck inside a ticking clock? Because you've been hypnotized. A trance that started the moment you were born. A story you never wrote, but still believe. This is what ancient wisdom calls spiritual hypnosis, the programming of limitation through fear. You were told you only live once, but your intuition whispers, this isn't the first time. You felt it déjà vu, soul recognition, a knowing beyond logic. It's not your imagination, it's your memory, peeking through the veil. The truth, you are not a name, not a body, you are a signal, spread across dimensions. Birth and death, just checkpoints each, blinking with memory, like a cursor in the eternal code. But if that's true, if birth and death are illusions, then who are you? Really, you're not here to survive time. You're here to transcend it. Because once the lie falls apart, you don't fear endings anymore. You start to remember who you were before the story began, and who you still are, beyond it. So, take a breath, let go of what you were taught, and prepare to see through the oldest illusion in human history. If birth and death were illusions, then who are you, really? You've been taught time is a line. It starts at birth, ticks forward second by second, until it ends with death. Clean, predictable. But that story is wrong. Because, in the quantum world, time is a riddle, and reality bends in ways your logic can't follow. Let's begin with a simple experiment. A beam of light is fired through two slits in a barrier. On the other side, it hits a screen. Now, if you don't observe the process, the light behaves like a wave interfering with itself, leaving a pattern. But the moment you observe, the wave collapses into a particle. The pattern disappears. Your mere act of looking collapses the wave, forcing the universe to choose. And this isn't theoretical, it's been repeated in labs across the globe. In quantum physics, they call this the observer effect. But here's where things get even stranger. In 2007, physicist Anton Zeilinger led an experiment that shocked the world. They delayed the choice of how to measure a photon until after it had already passed through the slits. And somehow, the photon's past behavior changed to match the future choice. Let that sink in. The future rewrote the past. This is called retrocausality. It suggests time doesn't just flow forward. It loops. It folds. It listens. And more importantly, it responds to consciousness. Now, imagine time not as a river, but as a vast block, an eternal structure where past, present, and future all exist at once. This is the block universe theory. Einstein hinted at it, saying, the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. In this model, your life is not a journey down a timeline. It's more like a sculpture. Ach Moment, each memory, each version of you is carved into the same timeless block. Your awareness, it simply moves through it. Think of it like watching a film. You experience one scene at a time, but the entire movie already exists. You just haven't seen the next frame yet. And here's where ancient mystics and modern physicists meet. In many esoteric traditions, time has always been seen as cyclical, as layered, as a spiral, not a line. The holographic model of time builds on this. It suggests that all moments past, present, future are encoded in every point of space, just like a hologram, where each part contains the whole. If that's true, then déjà vu isn't random. It's a moment when your mind touches another layer of reality. An echo, a resonance. Your consciousness isn't trapped inside your body. It might be tapping into the quantum field, where all versions of time coexist. Your birth, your death, your infinite possibilities. So what does this mean for you? It means your soul wasn't born at birth. It wasn't extinguished at death. It's always been part of the field, always present, always moving. You are not a product of time. You are a participant in it, a sculptor shaping timelines, a traveler crossing frequencies. That gut feeling, that vision in your dreams, that sudden insight from nowhere, these aren't accidents. They're cross signals from other versions of you existing across the block. And this is where you gain power. Because if your observation shapes the quantum field, then every intention, every focus, alters the timeline. You're walking. You're not here to obey time. You're here to sync with the future version of you who already knows the next move. This isn't just theory. It's practice. Right now, thousands are learning to align their choices with future states of being, pulling wisdom from ahead in time, healing wounds from the past, anchoring themselves to a quantum awareness that defies linearity. Your thoughts are not private. They ripple across time, across space, across versions of you. And when you begin to accept that, a door opens. Because if time is a fabric, a multi-layered, vibrating web, then death is not a stop sign. It's a stitch, a node, and your soul. It's the thread that runs through all of it. So forget what you've been told. Time doesn't pass. You pass through it. You are not a victim of time. You don't move through time. You sculpt its paths with attention. So if time is a tapestry, then where does your soul begin or end? Imagine a child, barely old enough to speak, describing the sound of a WW2 aircraft engine, the names of soldiers in a squadron, and the exact location where he claims he died. This isn't science fiction. It's a real case, documented by psychiatrist Dr. Ian Stevenson, who spent decades studying children with detailed past life memories. And he wasn't alone. Dr. Jim Tucker, continuing Stevenson's work at the University of Virginia, investigated over 500 such cases. The patterns were impossible to ignore. TZ children weren't just guessing. They provided names, cities, even causes of death. And in some of the most convincing cases, birthmarks matched fatal wounds from the previous life. they remembered. Skeptics say it's coincidence or imagination. But many of these children had no cultural or familial exposure to the lives they recalled. Some even spoke languages they were never taught. Some pointed to towns they'd never visited, and when taken there, recognized buildings, streets, and even people. So, if these memories are real, what mechanism allows them to exist? Here's where the science meets the soul. Modern neuroscience tells us that most memory is non-conscious, stored not in the thinking brain, but deep in the limbic and somatic layers, where trauma, instinct, and emotional patterns live. Now, imagine this deeper memory isn't just personal but transpersonal, stored not just in one brain, but in a shared informational field. Carl Jung called it the collective unconscious. Modern mystics refer to it as the Akashic field. And quantum theorists now speculate about a non-local mind, a consciousness that exists outside the skull, more like a network than a container. This is where past life memory may live, not as hallucination but as echoes in the field. And some minds, particularly children, may be more tuned to these frequencies. Children have more theta brainwave activity, which is the same state associated with deep meditation and hypnosis. This makes them natural trance receivers, open to impressions from what we call the past. Though, in the block universe model, past and future are simply coordinates in a timeless matrix. But memories echo. But trauma, love, fear, these are energies in motion. They don't fade, they loop. In many Eastern traditions, reincarnation isn't just recycling souls. It's a feedback system, a cosmic mechanism of balance, refinement, and evolution. Every thought, action, and intention creates a vibration. That vibration doesn't disappear. It reverberates across timelines, echoing into future expressions of the self. So when a child recalls drowning in a previous life and develops an unexplainable fear of water that's not random, that's unresolved energy looping forward. This is karmic memory, not punishment, but unfinished frequency. Your soul doesn't carry memories the way a hard drive does. It carries them like resonance, fears, attractions, abilities. These are all vibrational signatures, re-emerging in new forms. But if reincarnation is real, here's the bigger question. Who chooses these lives? Are we assigned them, or are we participants in our own rebirth? Ancient spiritual traditions say, you choose not from ego, but from the level of your higher self. This deeper aspect of you outside time, outside form reviews, lessons from your previous life, identifies the soul contracts you've yet to fulfill, and selects the circumstances most likely to evolve you. That means the life you're living now, with all its challenges, gifts, and strange synchronicities, may have been crafted by you before you entered the womb. This is the reincarnation model taught in esoteric mystery schools. This is the architecture of choice, where your soul is both the student and the designer. And that brings us full circle. What if your déjà vu, your instinctual knowing, your unexplainable fears, are not flaws but breadcrumbs, clues from other lives, guiding you to heal unfinished patterns, clues from the field, reminding you of who you've been, so you can remember who you really are. Because reincarnation isn't just about the past, it's a map of your potential. It shows you what you've carried, and it points to what you're here to transform. And that's the key. You're not just here to remember. You're here to integrate, to awaken, to choose your frequency consciously, this time, because memory isn't passive. It's a living interface with your soul's path. But what if you didn't just remember your past lives? What if you chose them? What if the life you're living right now wasn't random, not a roll of the genetic dice, not a biological accident? What if you chose it? Ancient teachings and modern testimonies alike suggest something revolutionary, that before you were born, you selected the time, the place, the family, and even the body that would best serve your soul's evolution. It's called the pre-birth planning stage, and it's more than just spiritual theory. In Tibetan Buddhist lineages, especially in advanced Phawa practices, certain lamas train to remain conscious during the dying process, not only to guide their own soul's transition, but to choose their next rebirth intentionally. They believe the bardo, the in-between state after death, is not just a waiting room, it's a navigation corridor, a lucid realm where one's intentions can shape the direction of reincarnation. And this isn't isolated mysticism. Across India's yogic traditions, advanced Kriya yogis like Lahiri Mahasaya spoke of planning their future incarnations to continue teaching or completing karmic tasks. But what does that mean for you? It means you may have signed a soul contract before you were even born. A spiritual agreement to meet certain people, face certain challenges, and awaken specific gifts. That difficult relationship in your life, that chronic pattern you've battled for years, that moment of pain that cracked you open, they may not be punishment. They may be part of your contract. These contracts are not written in words, but in vibration, encoded in energy fields before your physical form ever developed. And here's where it gets even more fascinating. Recent breakthroughs in epigenetics reveal that your genes are not static. They're responsive to beliefs, emotions, and environmental cues. So, if your soul chose a body with certain genetic tendencies, it wasn't locking itself into a prison. It was choosing a particular canvas to express what it came here to master. In other words, you may have chosen your body because of its limits, because within those limits lies the exact resistance you needed to evolve. Now let's bring this into the realm of modern psychology. In NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, there's a concept called identity scripting. It's the idea that most people unconsciously write their personal story based on childhood conditioning and social scripts. But with awareness, you can rewrite the script by changing the beliefs, language, and emotional anchors that shape your self-concept. Now imagine combining this with the soul-level idea of reincarnation. What if you're not only rewriting your current identity, but also realigning with your pre-birth design? What if the story you call me is just one layer, and there's a deeper, timeless self trying to break through? This deeper self, the soul scriptwriter didn't choose an easy life. It chose a meaningful one, because meaning comes from friction, from contrast, from choosing to remember in a world that teaches you to forget. And that brings us to the biggest misconception about reincarnation, that it's automatic, that it just happens to you. But mystic traditions across continents have hinted otherwise. They say, only the unconscious are recycled. Only those who haven't awakened are pulled by karmic momentum into another life without choice. The conscious ones. They plan, they select, they descend with intention, which means the more conscious you become now, the more authority you reclaim over your next incarnation, because this life is the preparation for the next, not in fear but in freedom. And here's the key insight. Conscious rebirth isn't just about the next life. It's about waking up within this one, realizing that your story can be rewritten because you are both the character and the author. Let's not forget what this implies about others. 2. That person who challenges you the most. They may have agreed to play that role so you could learn strength, compassion, or boundaries. Your family, your enemies, your soulmates. They may all be part of a soul contract web designed to activate something inside you. You don't have to blindly accept your suffering, but you can investigate it. Look at it as a signpost, not a sentence. A signal that you're moving through the exact syllabus your soul designed. So what now? Start with presence. Start with the realization that you are not a victim of fate, but a participant in it. And when you rewrite your self-concept, when you upgrade your beliefs and embody new choices, you're not betraying your path, you're fulfilling it. A contract isn't a cage. It's a cosmic dance you agreed to before you forgot the rhythm. If you could choose your next life, what would you do with this one? Imagine this. You're in a hospital bed, machines beeping, doctors shouting, and suddenly, silence. Time slows. Your body stays behind, but something else, something deeper lifts away. You see yourself from above. Then a tunnel, a brilliant light, and a presence so familiar, it feels like home. This is what happened to Rachel. After a near-fatal car crash, she reported floating above her body, watching surgeons fight for her life. She saw a golden light. She met her grandmother long past, and when she returned, she was never the same. Rachel's story is one of thousands, what we now call NDEs, near-death experiences, and they might be the clearest window we have into what lies beyond death. The science behind the mystery skeptics once dismissed NDEs as hallucinations, the brain gasping for oxygen. But growing research suggests a deeper truth. Neuroscientists have found that brain activity can persist for minutes after clinical death. In some cases, conscious perception spikes, even as the heart flatlines. This paradox has puzzled researchers for decades. What's even more compelling, people from completely different cultures with no shared religion or background report nearly identical visions during NDEs. They speak of floating above the body, moving through a tunnel, encountering loving beings. Life reviews that feel more real than life itself. This level of cross-cultural consistency isn't just anecdotal. It points to something universal, a shared architecture of transition. And here's where it gets stranger. Terminal lucidity, the mind's final spark. Meet George, an Alzheimer's patient who hadn't spoken in 2 years, hours before his death. He sat up, looked his daughter in the eyes, and whispered, "I'm proud of you." He died moments later. This phenomenon, called terminal lucidity, has been recorded in countless hospice cases. People with brain damage, dementia, or long-term coma suddenly become alert, aware, even insightful, just before death. How is this possible? If the brain is failing, how does clarity emerge in the final hour? Some researchers believe the soul or consciousness detaches from the body just before death, liberating itself from the broken hardware. What we interpret as mental clarity may be the soul unplugging from the matrix. Now ask yourself, if terminal lucidity is the soul's final expression, what are near-death experiences? They aren't brain malfunctions. They're soul echoes peeking through the cracks. The rainbow bridge between life and beyond. In ancient Tibet, there's a practice called Phawa, the art of conscious dying. Monks train for years to direct their consciousness out of the crown of the head at the moment of death, to choose their rebirth or transcend it altogether. Some lineages even claim that highly trained lamas can navigate dimensions after death consciously without confusion or fear. And here's the stunning part. What these monks describe in their final hours often mirrors modern NDE accounts. Floating sensation, clear light awareness, meeting guides or ancestors, review of karmic patterns. Two systems, one ancient, one modern, both describing the same bridge between worlds. But what if we didn't have to wait until physical death to explore it? Altered states as training grounds, deep meditation, lucid dreaming, sensory deprivation, psychedelic exploration. These states don't just mimic death, they rehearse your return beyond the veil. What if these are practice runs? What if you could prepare for death by learning to exit your body at will? Mystics across cultures agree, death isn't a wall, it's a door. But to open it without fear, you must understand what lies on the other side. Not just conceptually, but experientially. Because when you've touched that space, even once you lose your fear, you live with deeper clarity. You forgive more quickly. You care less about status and more about meaning. NDE survivors often say, "After I came back, everything changed." Not because they died, but because they saw the continuity of their being, that consciousness doesn't shatter at death. It expands. And maybe that's the real lesson. That death isn't a punishment. It's an awakening, a merging, a remembering, a re-entry into the greater self you've always been. So ask yourself, what if these near-death stories aren't fantasies? What if they're training manuals reminding you of something your soul already knows? What if you didn't need to flatline to cross the threshold? What if the veil was always thinner than you thought? But do we really need to die to see the other side? They've always told you your thoughts come from your brain, like signals from a radio tower, neuron firing, chemicals reacting. End of story. But what if that story is wrong? What if your mind isn't locked inside your skull, but radiates far beyond it? What if consciousness isn't produced by the brain, but only channeled through it? That's the theory behind one of the most controversial and exciting ideas in modern science, or orchestrated objective reduction, proposed by Sir Roger Penrose and Dr. Penrose, Stuart Hameroff. This theory suggests that your brain contains structures called microtubules, tiny protein lattices inside neurons that operate not like machines, but like quantum processors. In other words, the brain isn't a factory. It's a quantum receiver. Your thoughts, your sense of self. They might be arising from interactions between your biology, and something much larger. Because in quantum physics, observation isn't passive. Just looking at a particle changes its behavior. This is called the observer effect, and it means that your awareness literally shapes the outcome of reality at the smallest level. If your consciousness can influence subatomic particles, then reality itself isn't fixed, it's participatory. And that brings us to something much bigger. The heart is not just a pump. While the brain has long been thought of as the command center, another organ is quietly challenging that throne, the heart. According to HeartMath Institute, the heart has its own neurological network, a kind of mini-brain. But more than that, it emits a powerful electromagnetic field that can be measured several feet outside your body. Studies show this field shifts dramatically based on your emotions and intentions. When you're feeling love, peace, or gratitude, the heart field becomes more coherent, more ordered. This coherence can influence your brainwaves, your immune system, and even the heart rhythms of people around you. In other words, your state of being isn't private. It radiates like a tuning fork into the space around you. Your energy isn't a mood. It's data the universe responds to, or intuition, or even remote influence. Field consciousness, you are the signal. What if your consciousness is not a spark inside your skull, but a field, an invisible sea of awareness that interacts with other fields in physics? There's a principle called non-locality, the idea that particles can affect each other instantly, regardless of distance. Now, take that idea and apply it to consciousness. It suggests that awareness might not be confined to one point in space, but exists across a network of resonance. This opens the door to explain why you feel someone's gaze before they speak, why emotional energy can shift a room, why collective meditation has measurable physical effects. Your mind is not just yours. It may be entangled with minds across space and time. This is where ancient spirituality meets emerging science. And it gets even deeper. Panpsychism, everything is conscious. What if it's not just humans who are conscious? What if everything is? That's the foundation of panpsychism. A growing philosophical and scientific position that suggests consciousness is a fundamental property of the universe, like gravity or mass. From electrons to ecosystems, everything carries a sliver of awareness. This isn't a new idea. It echoes ancient animist beliefs, Taoist cosmology, and even indigenous worldviews that treat rivers, trees, and stars as living beings with memory and intention. But today, physicists like Dr. Max Tegmark are proposing that the mathematics of consciousness may be built into the very structure of reality. If that's true, then your awareness is not an isolated miracle. It's a node in a vast, intelligent system. And that means you're already interfacing with the universe. Every thought you have, every emotion, every act of focused intention is a signal. You're not just reacting to reality, you're participating in its formation. That gut feeling, that moment of synchronicity, that spark of intuition, those aren't glitches. They're feedback from the system. Because you're not inside the universe, you're woven into it. Which brings us back to the question, if your thoughts influence particles, and your heart broadcasts energy, and your awareness radiates across space, then maybe, just maybe, You were never just a brain in a body. You were a field of consciousness, shaping the very fabric of the cosmos. So, what if your thoughts aren't just in your head, but shaping reality itself? What if death isn't the only way to glimpse the infinite? What if there's a doorway not at the end of life, but deep within your mind? Welcome to the realm of altered states. States of awareness so profound, they can bypass ordinary perception and bring you face to face with past lives. Parallel selves, and the architecture of consciousness itself. Meditation, the inner stargate. Let's start with what seems simple meditation. But this isn't just about closing your eyes and breathing deeply. We're talking about something far more advanced, meditative states that deactivate the default mode network in the brain, allowing you to access non-ordinary dimensions of self. In deep meditation, monks report leaving their bodies, feeling timeless awareness, and even witnessing past incarnations with crystal clarity. These aren't metaphors. They're experiences documented in both spiritual lineages and modern neuroscience labs. Brain scans reveal that long-term meditators can shift into theta and gamma wave states, where memory, imagination, and intuition blur into one stream. It's in these states that some practitioners say they enter a lucid death protocol, a meditative practice to simulate the moment of death and consciously cross through it without physically dying. Ancient yogis called this phawa. Today, some refer to it as conscious exit training. The goal, to rehearse dying so that when death comes, you are already awake. Hypnosis, time travel through the subconscious now. Shift gears to hypnosis. Forget Vegas. This isn't spectacle, it's soul work. Real. Therapeutic regression hypnosis is used by thousands of professionals to help people access repressed memories, sometimes even from other lives. Dr. Michael Newton and Dr. Dive. Brian Weiss led pioneering work in past life regression, where patients under deep trance described vivid details of lifetimes they'd never read about or learned. But hypnosis doesn't just uncover the past. It can reprogram emotional patterns, release trauma from prior incarnations, and even install new identities aligned with your soul's evolution. In deeper states, some individuals reach what's called the theta gateway, a frequency bridge between waking reality and the soul field. This is where glimpses of the interlife, the space between incarnations, often occur, and what they report is astonishing counsels of light, soul contracts, life reviews, not after death, but during a simple trance on a couch, psychedelics, the chemical key. Then, there's psychedelics, used ritually for millennia, dismissed in modern times. Now, returning with scientific validation, substances like psilocybin, DMT, and ayahuasca are being researched by top institutions for their ability to induce ego dissolution, access transpersonal states, and awaken the timeless self. People describe visiting other dimensions, meeting intelligences, and receiving insights that rewire their purpose in life. One powerful theme, the realization that birth and death are fluid thresholds, not fixed destinations. These aren't trips. They're initiations, experiences that dissolve the illusion of separation and restore contact with what some call the source field, collective coherence minds that sync, shift reality. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. When people enter altered states together, something strange happens. In Princeton's Global Consciousness Project, scientists used random number generators to detect shifts in global coherence. What they found: during moments of mass meditation, tragedy, or celebration, these machines stopped being random. They became ordered. Think about that. Your consciousness, when aligned with others, may literally alter the field of reality. This isn't speculation. It's data. You don't need to die to glimpse the afterlife. You don't need to wait to awaken the soul's memory. You only need the right state of consciousness. And altered states, whether through breath, sound, silence, trance, or plant medicine, are the tuning forks to your original frequency, rehearsing the afterlife, remembering the before. From lucid death training to past life recall, from psychedelic awakening to theta state download, all these experiences point to one truth: you are more than this body, more than this name, more than this life. The boundaries you believe in were installed, programmed into your nervous system by culture, fear, and survival instinct. But in altered states, you remember the rest of you, the eternal part. So the real question isn't what happens after death. The question is, what part of you is awake enough to explore it? Now, accessing the soul's archive may not require death, just the right frequency. What if death was never the end? What if it was a curriculum, a cosmic examination you were meant to pass, not escape? Long before hospitals and heart monitors, civilizations had already mapped the death process, not just physically, but vibrationally. Let's start in ancient Egypt. Not merely obsessed with death, the Egyptians were scientists of the soul. Their Book of the Dead, known as the Book of Coming Forth by Day, was not about endings. It was a user manual for transcendence. Each soul, upon death, entered the Duat, a multi-dimensional realm filled with symbolic beings, cosmic trials, and energetic tests. At the center of this journey was the weighing of the heart. Your heart, seen as the record of all truth, was weighed against the feather of Ma'at, the principle of cosmic balance. If your heart was heavier, cluttered with guilt, fear, falsehood, you were devoured by Amit, the soul eater. But if your heart was light, you passed on to fields of peace, transformed and free. This ritual wasn't metaphor. It was a vibrational algorithm. Your frequency at the moment of death determined which reality you would tune into. Sound familiar? Now travel across time to Tibet. There, the Bardo Thodol, often called the Tibetan Book of the Dead, served a similar function. But instead of judgment, it offered guidance. This manual wasn't written for the dying, but for the already dead. It described, step by step, what the soul would see, feel, and face as it passed through bardos, or transitional states. Within 49 days, consciousness would cycle through visionary lights, deceptive illusions, and echoes of past karmas before choosing its next incarnation. Tibetan monks memorized these texts, not for poetic reasons, but so they could recognize the illusions of death while still within them. They trained to wake up inside the in-between. This is not fantasy. It's conscious navigation through dimensions most of us fear to name. Now enter the mysticism of Kabbalah. In the Tree of Life, we're familiar with the 10 Sephirot emanations of divine light, but few talk about its shadow twin, the Tree of Death, or Kliphoth. Here lies a reverse map, a descent into fragmented realities, where souls unprepared for transition become trapped in echo chambers of regret, denial, or craving. The ancients understood death is not just about what you leave, it's about where your frequency guides you next. Now, ask yourself, what do all these systems have in common? Sound. In Egypt, hieroglyphs were not just symbols, they were resonant codes. In Tibet, chants were used to vibrate the soul out of confusion and into clarity. And in Kabbalah, the Hebrew letters weren't just language, they were vibrational gates. Each tone, symbol, and sacred syllable was a key, unlocking inner frequencies that aligned your soul with the divine pattern. This is where ancient ritual meets modern physics. Studies now show that sound can organize matter. It's called cymatics. Frequency rearranges particles into complex patterns, geometry born from vibration. If this applies to sand and water, why not the soul? What if ancient rites weren't rituals, but frequency codes designed to stabilize the soul? What if death was less a punishment and more a resonance test, a final exam of vibration? The clearer your heart, the purer your intent. The higher your frequency, the smoother your passage. But if you're cluttered, fragmented, unaware, you scramble at death, looping through energetic noise until you find your way. Or not. That's why ancient manuals existed. Not to teach you how to die, but to remind you how to wake up. Death, they said, was not the real danger. Forgetting who you are, that was the trap. And now, science is beginning to catch up. Near-death experiences, terminal lucidity, and out-of-body states all suggest a persistent field of awareness beyond brain activity. And if awareness can persist, then death is just a door. But here's the twist. Which doorway you enter depends on the frequency you leave with. So maybe, just maybe, death is not a horror to avoid, but a rite of passage to rehearse. Maybe death is less a punishment and more a rite of passage. What if death was just a shift in code, the Kybalion? A mystical text rooted in Hermeticism, begins with a single principle that upends everything: all is mind. Not metaphor, not putri, a literal blueprint for existence. The universe, according to Hermetic philosophy, isn't made of matter, it's made of mental substance. Reality is a thought projected into form. That means death, like life, isn't an event. It's a shift in mental frequency. Picture this. You're not a body with a mind. You're a mind projecting a body, an avatar rendered by consciousness to navigate a vibrational landscape. And when the frequency changes, so does the environment. Hermetic teachings liken death to changing rooms in a vast house. You don't disappear. You simply step through another door into a different bandwidth of experience. But here's the deeper layer. If all is mind, then life and death are just two poles on a single spectrum, like hot and cold, light and shadow. Birth and death are not opposites. They're gradients, modulations of consciousness within a universal operating system. And guess what? You've always had access to the root code. Let's break it down like a developer would. If mind is the OS, then your thoughts are the interface. Every belief, emotion, and expectation is a command line you're unconsciously typing into the matrix of your own life. When you believe death is final, you create a firewall, a closed loop of fear and limitation. But when you shift that belief, when you reprogram the soul with possibility, you regain access to dimensions you once called home. This is more than theory. It's the metaphysical UX design of reality. Think about your waking life. The colors you notice, the events you attract, the people who show up at exactly the right or wrong time. These aren't random. They're feedback loops from a conscious interface responding to your internal frequency. And death. Death is just a massive UX shift, a system reboot into a new reality environment. Hermetic initiates knew this. They trained their minds not just to think clearly, but to generate coherent vibration, a stable field strong enough to carry through the death gate. And it wasn't just personal. They believed the more refined your inner world, the more precise your navigation of the afterlife. Here's the kicker. Modern science is now catching up slowly, painfully, but undeniably. Quantum theories like holographic reality suggest that everything we experience is projected from the edges of space-time, a sort of cosmic rendering engine driven by informational fields. Neuroscientists studying panpsychism argue that consciousness is not a product of the brain, but the fundamental fabric of reality itself. And tech futurists are now imagining the mind as the UI/UX layer of the cosmos, a way to read, write, and reprogram the matrix through awareness alone. It's as if ancient Hermetic law, quantum computing, and high-level design thinking are finally speaking the same language. And they're saying this: reality is not hard-coded. It's soft-scripted by your mind. So, what does that mean for death? It means death is not a system shutdown. It's a platform migration. Your consciousness doesn't crash. It ports to a new dimension, according to your current operating frequency. The smoother your emotional code, the more graceful your transition. That's why the ancients emphasized emotional mastery, inner clarity, vibrational purity. Because your exit strategy is determined by your inner blueprint, your beliefs, your traumas, your unresolved thoughts. Let's take it further. If reality is programmable and you are the programmer, then what happens when you fully awaken to your creator-level access? You start building post-death realities with as much precision as you build dreams, visions, and goals. Now, you become an architect not just of your life, but of your afterlives. And here's where Hermetic law becomes a roadmap. Mentalism tells you reality is thought-based. Vibration shows you all states are frequency patterns. Rhythm teaches you transitions are natural and navigable. With these principles, death becomes predictable, not because you know the details, but because you've mastered the field mechanics. It's no longer about what happens after. It's about what you bring with you when the interface collapses and the next one opens. That's the Hermetic key. You don't conquer death by fighting it. You transcend it by understanding how it works. And if death is frequency, then what happens when you tune in? You weren't born to survive. You were born to remember. The greatest lie ever sold was that life ends, that death is final. that your days are numbered, and that fear is wisdom. But what if that fear was the virus and the truth was always inside you? You're not a flickering flame. You are the fire behind suns, steady, eternal. Zopf ein. To live deathlessly isn't to deny the body will fade, but to stop letting that fact shrink your soul. It means living every breath as if your awareness is eternal, because it is. You don't need to believe in past lives to know you've been here before. You feel it in your bones, in the intuition that arrives before logic, in the dreams that don't feel like dreams. Living like you are, deathless starts with presence, sipping tea like it matters, speaking words like they shape worlds, loving like it echoes past this life and into the next. Every act becomes sacred when you remember you're writing not just this life, but the echo that follows. This is how you keep the soul thread awake, by aligning thought, action, and intention as if they will ripple through eternity, because they do. You weren't here to end. You were here to echo.